Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. I am your host, Mindy. A friend of mine told me in early 2018 that she saw a vision of me with a microphone in front of me. I laughed at the time and said, "I don't see any microphones in my future." Less than a year later, I was recording my first podcast on this show. I'm not going to say, "I hope you enjoy this podcast." My podcast is not truly meant to be enjoyed. Real grief, real healing is just that, real and raw. I provide you an opportunity to learn and share in the grief others are experiencing, and then we share how they are healing or perhaps not. Grief changes each of us in some way. Many of my guests have been encouraged to open new businesses, start foundations, and in general, work to make the world around us a better place. Grief is universal. How we decide to move onward, seeking healing, is individual. A significant part of my healing comes through the courageous kindness actions of others. As you listen to my podcasts, you will hear how you can give and receive courageous kindness too. Together, we are better.
Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan, taking a deep dive into the reality of the difficulty grief brings and offering insight into the healing available to each of us. Today, episode 19, The Power of a Thank You, the Power of Burying a Child. And now your host, Mindy Corporan.
Hi friends, it's Mindy Corporan. Thank you for joining me today on Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. This is my podcast where I either talk myself about something that I feel like might be an important message to send to you, or I interview someone who has also experienced some kind of maybe a tragedy or a trauma or a very significant life disruption in their own lives. And I interview them, and then I move them into talking to us about how they healed. Today, you get me. So today, I've been really pondering the last several days, what am I going to talk about? And I do that every time when it's just me. I start feeling a little bit self-conscious about, what else should I be sharing with you? And what I do is I tend to turn to God. I am of the Christian faith, and I turn to God and I say, what do you want me to talk about today? And what do you want me to offer today? So those are questions that I have asked, and I'm going to tell you I'm not sure that I know the answer. Being very frank with you, I have 3 different topics in front of me, and I tell you what, I will try not to bounce back and forth between them because I think that could get confusing. So I will try to stick with one, and then I'll let you know when I'm segueing to another. One topic that has been very popular going on in our world right now, and I really do mean pretty much everyone who's listening to me and my support group, this is going on in our world. And it's all about kindness. And so kindness is not owned by anyone. The actions of kindness, the desire to want someone to do an act of kindness, or the desire to do an act of kindness for yourself or for someone else. So if it's an internal feeling, these things, I must just be in the realm of people who this is what we're all talking about. I have been very lucky, and maybe it's not just luck, maybe it's where I place myself, but I have been very blessed to be in groups of people who we are all very much focusing on kindness. I would say if you're not in that situation, if you are scrolling through social media and you are seeing hateful things, hateful words, maybe not necessarily to you, but being thrown back and forth, perhaps that is not who you might want to be following on your social media feed. I would recommend that you find pictures of kittens or pictures of puppies or lambs or even maybe goats. Just find what helps make your soul feel better. Because somehow I have done that, and I am very grateful that in my social media feed, for the most part, everyone seems to be talking about kindness. And so I want to just add on to that a little bit more and encourage you to find things to do to be kind to yourself and to be kind to others. Now, let me be a little bit more specific when I say to be kind to others. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, let's just think about where do you perhaps spend your time and your money? And as a consumer, are you thankful for someone who offered you good service? Let's just use a hairdresser for an instance. I mean, I think everyone, okay, I take that back. There are some people who are bald. So, those people who have no hair, you are not going to get your hair done. So, anyone else who has hair on their head might be going to get their hair done at some point, get it cut, go to a barber, etc. So, how does this wrap into being kind? Well, if that person gives you a good haircut, a good hairstyle, a great shampoo, if they offer you wonderful service, something kind you could do is more than pay them, is offer them a review. So again, if you're on social media, you could offer them a review by, messaging them and letting them know what a great job they did. You could go on their social media pages, whether that's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, or maybe it's their website. Believe me, if you want to offer them a positive review, they will let you know where you can leave that positive review. And you may have never thought to yourself that that in itself is an act of kindness. But if you like what they offer you and you want to help them, that is a great way to help them. And other than paying them, obviously, I think sometimes we think to ourselves, well, I paid them for their service and they did the service and that was our transaction. And I just don't know I don't believe and think that that in itself is an act of being kind. That's a transaction that we should do because they provided us a service. So if you want to take it a step further, and that's what I'm asking you to do, write a review for them, thank them. If nothing else, handwrite them a thank you note and mail it to them or hand it to them. And then let that person, your hairdresser who I'm talking about in this example, post it themselves on their own social media. That's just one act of kindness that I tend to think many of us don't think about. I was having a conversation with my husband, who is now going by the name Leo or Leonardo. We moved to South Florida. And so his name is Leonard, and he's always gone by either Lenny or Len. But in Florida, he's decided to go by Leo or Leonardo. And if you can hear me kind of laughing and smiling, it's fun. So just so you know, I'm still going by Mindy. Anyway, I was letting him know that I felt like we'd had some great service from some of the contractors who've been working on our new property. And I wanted to help them out by posting a thank you on social media. And he kind of said what I think a lot of people do say. He said, well, we paid them. And I said, yeah, I know, but that's just for a transaction. I want to help them grow their business. I want to be more generous with them. And rather than give them more money, which really no one sees other than me and them, I would want to give them, people that like could find them and could use their services. So that's where this conversation came from, because I just think that the whole act of continuing to thank people in a public manner has not been looked at as one of those options for kindness. One of the reasons that this idea has not been talked about is because of COVID, because we've been hibernating and not particularly out and about. This idea wasn't going to work well. But if you're starting to go out again and perhaps you are standing in a line somewhere buying a cup of coffee or maybe even a breakfast, or you're going through a drive-through, just ask the person at the counter, how much does that meal cost that's in the car behind me? In other words, the person behind you, what did they buy? And if it's within your realm to help out that person, this is a very random act of kindness. You don't know them. They don't know you. it's likely you will never meet that person, nor will they ever be able to thank you. What if their meal costs under $8 and you say to the person in the window looking at you, I'm going to pay for that person's meal as well? That is a random act of kindness. So again, hasn't been talked about much. It was talked about a few years ago as, hey, buy somebody else a cup of coffee, etc. But again, that's something financial from your pocket. And if you don't want to or can't or are not of the means right now to be offering more money in the form of acts of kindness, I really like the idea of the old-fashioned thank you. And I'm going to take the old-fashioned thank you just another step further. People ask so often, Mindy, how are you strong enough? How were you strong enough to not only survive, but really start thriving and creating acts of kindness, goodness, love, forgiveness for other people in the midst of the fact that you had a significant tragedy? And I will tell you, maybe it's in my DNA. I'm not for sure. So I'm telling you, maybe it's in my DNA. Perhaps it's from what my parents taught me was to give to others, give of myself to others, specifically from my father, who was a caregiver. He knew at the age of 8 that he wanted to be a medical physician. And so he went to medical school. He and my mom put him through medical school, and he cared for people literally until the day that he died. He was still working at the time of his murder. And he taught me, just by virtue of watching what he did on a daily basis and was his passion, to care and nurture for others because he did so in the medical field, that as an act of kindness, can't we all do that? Nurture others? Okay, I went down a little rabbit hole there. Let me back up. So thanking people, and where did I get my strength? I want to thank people who are in my history, from coaches to teachers to my principals, my friends from my university, my friends from high school, other moms and dads who I saw parent. When you find people in your life that challenged you and or supported you and lifted you up, people that are not always yes people to me are the ones who I think have encouraged me the most. And I am trying to make a bigger effort. I am making a bigger effort to thank them. So think to yourself right now, who are 3 people that have encouraged me in my life, that helped me become who I am? Write their names down. And when you have a moment after the podcast is over, write them a thank you note. And I don't mean on text, and I don't mean on email. A phone call would be fantastic, like a real live talking phone call, or maybe a Zoom call. That would be fun too. But do you like getting mail? I love getting mail. And so I think it would be fun. I think it would be a wonderful act of kindness if you wrote a thank you note to 3 people that have meant something to you in your life. And again, I want to go back in history here. I am talking about people from your history. If there's someone who's just rocked your world in the last couple of weeks, great. They can get a thank you note too. But I really want you to go back and think to middle school, high school, college. Who helped you? Maybe it was your principal. And if they're still living, go and thank them. Now, I know I have a few young people who are listening to me, and I know that your middle school principal is still living, so you can still write that person a thank you note. And that is a wonderful act of kindness. I've been excited that over the past several months, my church, actually I have 2 churches, but one of my churches, Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, Kansas, has been celebrating 30 years of just being in existence. And so they had 30 days of kindness from October 3rd to November 3rd. And then a very dear friend of mine who is a wellness hero, and her name is Dr. Michelle Robin. And she hosted her company and her foundation, Small Changes, Big Shifts. They hosted also 31 days of kindness. And right now, my foundation has piggybacked on those two activities, and the foundation, Faith Always Wins Foundation, and our experience, 7 days, Make a Ripple, Change the World. We are in the middle of 30 days of kindness. I am sure that we are not the only organizations who are asking everyone to take a deep breath, allow yourself to have a little bit of vulnerability, allow yourself to thank someone, to think about kindness before you respond with maybe that agitated, irritated, potentially angry email, text, or post. That's what I think is important in helping us heal. I found that offering to help others very soon after the deaths of my dad and Reet, offering to enrich other people's lives helped my heart feel better. And I won't say that it started healing at that moment or in that month or those first several months or year. But in memory of my dad and Reet, we filled the pantry, a food pantry at Operation Breakthrough. So filling of the pantry was what Reet, my son, was doing at the time of his death. Now, he wasn't actively doing it at the moment of his death, so I don't mean to confuse you, but he was a life scout in Troop 92 in Leawood, Kansas, and he was working on his eagle. And it had been, I'm going to tell you very honestly, a dream of mine for him to be an eagle. And I was very thankful that it was also a dream of his. At least he was pursuing it in spite of whether he thought it was his dream. But he did love scouts. So he was in the middle of working on his Eagle Scout project with Operation Breakthrough, and he was planning it at the time of his death. And other scouts picked that up. And we as a family, specifically my brother, Tony, who I've interviewed on my podcast previously, and his son, Andrew, who's my nephew. Andrew was in Scouts and still is. And other scout troops. There were about 3 scout troops involved. And there were several young men in particular who really picked up that baton and made sure that that pantry got filled. And it didn't just get filled, it was overwhelmingly filled. And so a special thank you that I need to send is to Will Sharp. And so when I finish my podcast, I'm going to thank Will Sharp because he felt very compelled to make his Eagle Project a patterned after Reet's, and he helped fill that pantry. So that's a special thank you. And it helped my heart to be giving back. It helped my heart and my soul to be engaged with others, watching other children in particularly smile, get food for their tummies, be happy. Did I cry through the process? Absolutely. But crying is part of healing, and giving back is part of healing. So now I'm going to switch just a little bit in terms of the topics that I wanted to cover. And I really think I actually landed myself in a pretty good segue. There are other people that I know, and many others actually, and I'm only going to mention 2 today on this podcast. I didn't ask their permission, but I feel like I have their permission because they're friends of mine. And you know what? I'm going to actually mention 3. I do have one more that I think is important, and I would have his permission as well. So what I'm talking about is that these are parents who lost children, who had to bury their children, which we should never have to do for any reason, whether it's a sickness, an accident, a mental illness, a violent crime. It just doesn't matter. If we lose our children, it is devastating. And each of these parents that I'm going to mention have created a way forward for themselves by creating and through creating a path to help others. Okay, so my first friend and person that I'm going to just talk about a little bit, her name, my friend, is Jan Mars. And her daughter, Lane Mars, died by suicide. And I will put in our show notes the details about Lane Mars and specifically the details about the foundation called Speak Up. And it's called Speak Up, Break the Silence. And Lane's family was, of course, extremely devastated by her death. And what they wanted to do about it was to help other people. So they joined the Speak Up Foundation, which had already been started. And the Speak Up Foundation helps people, families, and young people who need help with mental health assistance, and suicide prevention. So I'm talking about the Speak Up Foundation, and I want to emphasize that my friend Jan Mars joined this organization. The inspiration of Speak Up, Break the Silence was from Jack Ryan, Ethan Young, and Lane Mars, and their families have become part of the Speak Up family. And what they continue to do is channel their grief, not all of it. They don't just all of a sudden not have grief, but they channel their grief to help others. The next person that I want to mention who has done exactly the same thing and is actually the first person that I met right after my dad and Reed's murders, who really provided me the path to do what I wanted to do. And this gentleman, his name is Roger Kemp. His daughter, Allie, was murdered in June of 2002. And Mr. Kemp, what he has told me is that because Allie was attacked and had to defend herself as much as she could, the police told him that if she had known any more self-defense, if she'd known any self-defense, that she might have saved her life. And so what Roger Kemp and his family did is they started the Allie Kemp Educational Foundation, and they host the Allie Kemp Take Defense classes, and it's TAKE. And their whole goal is to help other women learn how to have self-defense so that they can care for themselves. And their tagline is, train a woman, save a life. He has spoken nationally, internationally. The Allie Kemp murder made national headlines. I will put all of this in the show notes because the important aspect of what I'm trying to share with you when I am speaking about each of these people that I know personally, I know how they lost their children, and I know what they've done since, is that they are helping to heal themselves by helping you and by helping other people. And I would just say to you that if you are grieving anything, if you're grieving a job loss, if you're grieving the loss of a pet, if you're grieving a family member, think to yourself, how could I best honor myself? How could I best honor who I'm grieving or what I'm grieving, and do better in our world, make our world a better place. The last person that I want to mention has become a new friend of mine, and her name is Susan Bro. And Susan's daughter, Heather Heyer, was murdered in Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017 at a rally, and it's made national headlines as well. And the Heather Heyer Foundation was created. This is just another example of a parent looking at how they lost their child and how they could channel their grief to help themselves and to help others. Again, all of these will be in the show notes. And I felt compelled to just mention these three. There are many more that I know. And I might just do another podcast at a later date where I bring up more people. And I am also interested in asking each of these people, Jan and Roger and Susan, to be on my podcast so that they can share with you more intimately about their loss, but about what they do and how their healing has helped them. And their healing helps you. I think that every single day they miss their child, but they also channel that energy into sending the message to others on how to either help with mental health, how to help people find more equality, which is what the Heather Heyer Foundation does, and or on the Take Defense, on Allie Kemp Take Defense, how to help women in particular know how to defend themselves in any instance. These people are all very meaningful and they are all enriching our lives for the better. So, friends, if you would just consider what I've been talking about today, and I want you to think about kind actions. I want you to reflect on who in your life was meaningful to you and how you could thank them. I want you to think about who you engage with on maybe a consumer basis in any way or a family basis, and who do you need to thank right now for helping support you in any endeavors in life. And take a moment to write a thank you note. And then I want you to consider these three individuals that I've shared with you and how they channeled their grief. And if you are grieving or you know someone who's grieving, how could they possibly channel their grief a better way? I know that another dear friend of mine is just surviving breast cancer. And I know that it's very important to her to get the word out to other women who are suffering from breast cancer. I have a friend who is a teacher and she's struggling with her students at school, in particular because of COVID, and the kids are not, they're not there yet. They're not on premise. And it's just this long-standing wonder about what's going to happen in her classroom and being alone in her classroom. And that is causing her grief. And it's real. The grief that I talk about from my own personal perspective is from the murders of my dad and son. But because I've interviewed several people and I have really researched grief, I understand that grief comes in many forms and fashion. And from grieving the loss of a person to grieving the loss of a job to grieving just the unknown that we're living in. And clearly the COVID that we are still living in, this pandemic, is swirling around us. And that is a real piece of grief. I also want to give you an opportunity and give you permission. I say that kind of often, but I feel like I have to give myself permission sometimes to just say, you know what, I'm sad today. And I want to do something kind for myself today. And I mentioned this in a different frame of mind, thinking about a friend of mine who has had COVID and is still suffering. It's what you would call the long haul recovery. This friend of mine got COVID in early July 2020. And I'm talking about this in November of 2020, and she is still experiencing problems. And so she's seeking additional medical help, additional healing help. But one of the things that she needs is just emotional support, that it's real. Because when you look at her, you can't see that she's struggling. And why is it that if we can't see that someone is struggling with a pain in their heart or a pain in their leg or a pain in their head, if we can't see it, we don't know it's there, so we tend to not believe them. And when we are not believed, that is painful. I want you to be around people who believe you. I want you to be around people who support you. I want you to be around people who will pray with you and encourage you. Because there is a path to healing. There is a path to finding joy. And it takes time, but it takes effort. Friends, it takes effort on your part. So pull out your pen, pull out your thank you cards. Think about how you can memorialize something that is causing you grief. How is it that you can honor something that is causing you grief? How is it that you can honor a person who supported you? We really are in this together. We are here to inspire one another. We are here to encourage one another. Let's all do that together. I hope that you've just enjoyed, I guess, as much as you can what I offer. I really do feel like what I talked about today was something that needed to be mentioned. It needs to be mentioned that if you aren't believing your friends when they're hurting, then maybe you're the one hurting them. It means that if you aren't out there taking those social media posts off where people are unkind, maybe you're being unkind. So look yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, am I being kind? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being kind to others? Am I helping other people heal? Or am I part of a problem? I think sometimes we have to take a real hard look at if we've hurt someone, what can we do about it? And if we're hurting, who do we have around us to help support us? Friends, thank you so much for joining me on Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corcoran. I hope you have a blessed day and that you stay safe and healthy. Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for this podcast of Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corcoran. If you want to dive deeper into how you might heal yourself or a friend, please pick up a copy of my book, Healing a Shattered Soul. Published on May 3rd, 2021, you can find my memoir anywhere books are sold. You will also find me in social media channels as Mindy Corcoran. Take time to help yourself heal, accepting courageous kindness. Take time to heal another by giving courageous kindness. Together, we are better.
Real Grief, Real Healing is copyright 2021 to 2022, Mindy Corcoran, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. This podcast is a production of 818 Studios.